Hello and welcome to the interview here on France 24. Our guest today is Leonid Volkov. He is the top aide to jailed Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny. He joins us from Vilnius in Lithuania. Thank you very much for being with us.
My pleasure.
I want to have your reaction to the words used by the US president during his recent visit to Poland. He described Vladimir Putin as a butcher, and then in a speech he said this man cannot remain in power. The US administration then walked back those remarks, said regime change was not its objective in Russia. But do you read it that way? Don't you think that it's maybe a change in the perception of Vladimir Putin at the very top in Washington?
Well, a long-expected change. Of course, I completely second everything that President Biden said. Mr. Putin is indeed a butcher, a war criminal, a terrorist, and indeed he can't remain in power. The problem is that we have been explaining this for years, and Skripal poisoning, Navalny poisoning, hundreds of political prisoners, annexation of Crimea, and downing of Boeing MH17 were enough. Angela Merkel once famously said in 2014 that Vladimir Putin is, quote, not in touch with the reality. The world knew he is detached from the reality, and the world didn't act accordingly. The world waited for 8 years, which to a lot of extent allowed the current tragedy to happen.
In Ukraine, things are moving. Russia is seemingly changing its position. It announced that it would drastically reduce its military presence against the capital, Kyiv, and also Chernihiv. Obviously, this remains to be seen. But do you sense that maybe Vladimir Putin is reading the writing on the wall, which says that he cannot win that war in Ukraine and that he may have blundered into this war?
Well, Vladimir Putin was clearly playing a blitzkrieg. He wanted to be in Kyiv in 72 to 96 hours since the beginning of invasion. That's why paratroopers in Hostomel airport, that's why tanks sent maximum speed to Kyiv in the very first day of the war. He failed. It's already clear since many weeks that his blitzkrieg failed. He admits it only today, too little too late, because enormous damage has been caused, enormous amount of blood has been shed for nothing. So how will Vladimir Putin now explain why did he destroy so many Ukrainian cities? Why did he kill so many civilians and soldiers and Russian soldiers? I can't imagine. I mean, his propaganda machine is very strong and very capable. But even for Putin's propaganda, this will be kind of quite a challenge to explain that yet again, everything is going according to the plan. That the plan initially was not to invade Kyiv, but only to take over the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, and so on and so on. Of course, propaganda will now try to do it. They will try to be, well, persuasive, but I hope they will fail once again.
Do you think the Russian people will also read it the way you read it, despite all the propaganda? And we've seen how some social networks are being shut down, some media are being shut down in Russia. But do you think the Russians will realize that something went wrong and that the regime is not as strong as they might think it to be?
Well, of course, Russia is very huge, 140 million people, very diverse also by their media consumption. We can't judge like Russian people as a whole. Some of them will stick to the propaganda up to the end, as some Germans were stuck with the propaganda till May 1945. But some of them are now starting to realize what's happening. And it's actually a very important front of this war. There are three fronts. Of course, the military one is the most important, where Ukrainian armed forces are protecting their country. But also there is the economic front, where like sanctions and pressure is being applied on Putin to stop this war. And of course, there is an information front, where we are fighting, for instance, trying to break through the propaganda, to bring the actual, to bring the perception of the actual situation to as many Russian people in the country as possible. Because if there will be no support for war internally, also soldiers will not be fighting. Soldiers will refuse to fight. And of course, for Putin, it will be much more challenging to keep his grip on power if his war is not anymore supporting within the country. And I would say that we feel that we are able to achieve a lot of progress, if not breakthrough, on this front, because there is a shift in opinion of Russian society, very visible shift in the last few weeks.
Right. I want to go back to Alexei Navalny. Last week, a Russian court found him guilty of embezzlement, contempt of court. He was sentenced to 9 years in jail. He had already been sentenced to 2.5 years. Navalny is supposed to serve his new sentence in a quote-unquote strict regime jail. This means much harsher conditions. There have been reports that he is already being harassed in jail. So a very simple and dire question. Do you fear for his life if he goes to such a prison?
Yes, of course. I mean, he is in custody of that very people who tried to kill him 1.5 years ago. And during the last year, we expected that the only protection is the publicity, like that people are talking about Alexei Navalny and what he's doing. So now with the war occupying very naturally, of course, all the headlines and overshadowing the Navalny story, we feel he's more endangered than ever. And that's why it's so important that we are talking about him and we are not forgetting about him. These 9 years, though, are just a legal formality. Everyone knows, everyone knew from the very beginning, his sentence is effectively a life sentence. The question is, whose life? Who will survive? Putin or Navalny? Navalny is Putin's personal political prisoner, and when Putin is gone, Navalny is released. I believe that Putin, when he decided to start this war against Ukraine, he actually very much shortened his term in power, and so he very much shortened Alexei Navalny's prison term.
But do you think that in the meantime, he's in real danger?
Yes, of course he is. And the world should keep an eye on him.
Right. You have kept an eye on Putin's riches. You revealed a while ago, just a few days ago, some links to between the president and the Sherazad, a very large yacht, saying that the crew was made up largely of Russian security forces. Do you think that it is important to continue making those revelations, which are, of course, denied by the Kremlin?
It is, of course, very important because it helps to fight on this second economic front. It helps to identify Putin's weaknesses. It helps to find out where the leverage is possible against him. Well, our most famous investigation about Putin's palace on the North Sea shore actually revealed how small the man is. So he had 20 years of unlimited power in the richest and largest country in the world. He could have built the best university of the world or the best network of paved roads. But he has chosen to build a posh palace with, gold everywhere and red carpets and so on. It says so much about his personality. And this understanding of Putin's personality, along with interiors of this enormous yacht and all other luxury items he has, gives a lot of help, gives a clue to how actually the West should deal with him, to go after his money, because money is so important for him.
Right. Do you think the West knew what you have been revealing and chose not to put it out on the table, maybe until now?
Yes, of course. For the time being, the West enjoyed billions of US dollars being pumped from Russia, being stolen in Russia and stashed in the West and reaching Western economies. Billions of dollars buying villas in Côte d'Azur and yachts in Germany and properties in Mayfair in London. Of course, they contributed to well-being of economy in the West, and the West was closing the eyes on how and where this money came from.
Do you think this is finished now? That clearly the war in Ukraine is the dramatic change you were hoping for?
The cost is too high. And of course, we were calling for these personal sanctions against Putin's assets, against properties of his oligarch friends for many years. Good that it is finally happening, but so bad that it is happening at so much cost.
Right. I want to ask you a last question. An investigation by Bellingcat, the insider, and the BBC discovered that in the days and months prior to his assassination back in 2015, the Russian opposition leader Boris Nemtsov was actually followed by members of the same squad that would subsequently followed and allegedly poisoned Alexei Navalny, and that they belong to the FSB, the Russian security services. Would you consider that this says a lot about Vladimir Putin and the way he deals with those who he feels are dangerous opponents?
First of all, I have to correct you because we don't speak about alleged poisoning of Alexei Navalny.
Right.
We speak about poisoning. It has been proven beyond reasonable doubt. So the fact that Alexei Navalny has been poisoned on Putin's order is as clear as 2 times 2 equals 4. And the fact that the same squad has been tailing Boris Nemtsov, who was a very prominent opposition leader and an ex-deputy prime minister, is of course very important because it shows that Putin's killing machine, his system of arbitrary killings of political opponents existed long time ago. At that time, when the world leaders were shaking hands with them, at that time when Putin tried to be a reputable and respectable member of G7 and G20, he was already killing political opponents. So it's not that he has gone crazy in the last 2 years. He always was.
Leonid Volkov, I want to thank you very much for being our guest here on the France 24 interview, and thank you for watching it. Stay tuned for more news.